everyone, it's Uncle Destiny here with you. It's time to do the readings for the month of April and see what it holds for everyone. We've recently had this equinox, so we're now in the season of spring. And for those also in the know, we recently just finished a Mercury retrograde. Now, I know I didn't mention much of that in the previous reading, just for the simple fact that whether you really follow the retrogrades or not, these things are going to be going on. Life is always going to be going on, irrespective of what type of astrological force that's at play. Now, the astrological forces, they impel, as someone else has put it, versus influence. So they help set up the parameters of a situation. But you ultimately have the choice in how you act in that situation. So that's why I don't talk too much about astrological things. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get the ancestors and the spirits and everyone in and see what the month of April holds for everybody. Alrighty, so we have thrown the bones and now we have our spread for this month. And it's a bit all over the place. And see, we've got our copper piece that's here at the edge of the reading surface. So that's talking, the copper piece is our piece that is talking about the connection with spirit. It's kind of like the transmitter. And we're at the edge here. And I feel like spirit is going to be saying we're at the border point of where we're either supporting or not. But we'll see more as we move through the rest of the reading. And so we have this shell, which is on its back, or I should say we see the outside of its shell. So this is about more things that are external as opposed to internal. There's our quartz piece, and we have a new number on the die, which is number 8. And we have then our larger bones. So this one is going to be about work. This one is family. That one is home. Now, we'll start more with our outer ones. So as I said, the home one sitting over here, very flat. I'm not going to worry. Home is going to be pretty much insular. Not a lot to worry about of that in this month of April. Equally so, the side of family. Family is going to be taking care of itself. Again, it's going to be it's going to have its presence, but it's going to be at a distance. So a lot more of the energies that are going to be focusing on in this month of April and this starting period of spring are going to focus more around your work components than it is family and home, which have been a big factor in these last months, pulling a lot of people's attention. And part of this is also due to the fact that we are now in spring. Now, historically, spiritually, many cultures have focused as spring being the start of the year, as opposed to what we practice with the calendar system or the lunar calendar system. So we're all very much focused on what is going on in this new year. And this new year, spring-wise, is going to be more about work. And when I talk about work, this is not just what you do to bring in the money to pay the bills. This is also life purpose. And life purpose can be very different than what you do to pay the bills. And that's what we're sensing here with the work bone. So things are going to be intensifying with work, and especially with the shell piece being outside, being on it, outside facing, it means that whatever you're going to be dealing with in this period of time is very much a focus on what things are coming from outside relationships. So setting up the connections that you have there with other people, other organizations, and how are you making them balanced? How are you making them ones that are profitable for you? But either way, you have to have interactions with the outside world, not the inner world, the outside world. So it's much more about that, since it's in the proximity to the work bone. Equally, as you can see, we've got a couple of the support bones, and again, these are ones that are along the tailbone and the spinal bone. So this is again much more about the intellect and providing balance than being about the emotion. So you need to really look at what are the what's intellectually going on, what is actually providing balance. And balance sometimes does not necessarily mean wonderful and pleasant. Sometimes balance is negative. So it's really going to be about bringing that in and dealing with how your work is providing you balance and being intellectually focused. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't inspiration, and that doesn't mean that there isn't spirit and emotion, because we have several of the rib bones, and they're interconnected here, coming together. And it's also balanced on top of one of the tailbones, which provides balance. So it is, what are the inspirations that are coming in that provide balance? What are the inspirations that are coming in that are psychological, mental, towards the work environment, and they're going to be coming in from outside. So we've got to decide which things are okay for us to remove, open up our shell and let in, and what things aren't. And we also have one of the rib spinal bones here under the shell piece. And again, with it being in the proximity of the work bone, this is what we're working with. Now we also have the quartz piece. And the quartz piece is dealing with memories, story. It is the crystallization of the past. And again, we're looking at how has our past influenced what we are doing for work and life purpose. Positively, negatively, what has been the same, what has been different. But our focus is on work and how we're interacting with the outer world. So this might mean, how are we interviewing with other positions? How are we talking to other people about building connections and building bridges for projects? How are we inventing new things that will invite people in to help us with our work and do the things we're looking to do? So that's what's going on there. And we have a number of the other support bones here. A lot of the tailbones, a couple of the rib bones. And you notice here we have the top spinal bone with one of the rib bones going through it, and very much that aspect of inspiration and the intellect. How can we think about these new projects, new ideas that are coming on? And keep in mind, these are ideals, so we need to move the ideal out of the memory and into the physical space. That also means that some of the ideas need to be tempered. Some need to be expanded. But that's going on. Now, the other aspect, too, is we have the broken rib bone here at this same place, which means that there is going to be a energy to try and say, negate whatever this idea is, whatever this purpose is. And it's going to be trying to destroy the idea as opposed to the inspiration. So it's going to be, again, looking at what is the idea, how can it be made and brought into reality, but also what are those things that are against it. A conversation I was having today with somebody was talking about the idea of how the environment also influences how we use space, how we build, what's available. So an island is that's limited in size and space. They may not build a lot of things out laterally. They might build more vertically. And we have a perfect example of that if you look at New York. It is a place where they had built as far as they could out laterally, then they had to start building vertically. Now here where I live in California, in the South Bay of the San Francisco Bay, we have to have a car to get around, as opposed to very much using public transportation, because we have a lot of lateral space to be able to move in, and that influenced how and why the space came together. Not to mention also the industries that were here. At one point, this place was known very much for agriculture. So you're also looking at large plots of land that need to be maneuvered around. Eventually, the defense industry came in, building massive construction plants. Again, large areas to be able to move around in. And present day, we're dealing with a lot of the tech campuses. So, again, large place that even if you are moving around on the campus, you may be walking, but it's an insular place. And if you want to get anywhere else, you have to be able to go. You're going to need the vehicle to move around. So, it has an influence, and it can have a positive influence, it can have a negative influence, but you also need to be able to account for what is that negative influence. What is that part that is trying to derail? Now, this brings us back to what I was starting off with, the copper piece. And again, like I said, this is about spirit, and spirit's at the borderline at the moment. And with spirit at the borderline, it meaning that we're either going to help you or we're going to pull away. But it's really going to be contingent on how you address this idea. And this idea needs to be something that is going to be working and affecting the outer world and the outer benefits. Now, I'm going to shift and move. We're going to talk about the dice. We have the number 8. So this is the 8th house, and this is what's going to be influencing all of this, including the work base. And that is talking about intimacy. It's going to be talking about sex, bonding, shared money, and property. So how much of our work in all of this is going to be centering around intimacy? And intimacy can have multiple levels. It can be not just physical intimacy, it can be emotional intimacy. It can be spiritual intimacy. When we go to, say, a church or a ritual gathering, and we are all working together to perform the ritual or go through the worshiping service, that is an intimate spiritual space. When we are sharing with somebody our hopes, our dreams, our goals, and even the complexity or the hurt that might come with it, that is the emotional, mental intimacy. And of course, when we are cuddling with those that are significant to us, that we care with, or having a more sexual relationship, which is the other component here, that is intimacy. And when it comes to sex, we are, again, talking physical sex, we're talking mental emotional sex, and we are talking spiritual sex. And spiritual sex, for some, centers around that idea of they are connecting with the divine through their sex acts, through their acts of pleasure. For the mental emotional, it can be those people who really enjoy getting lost in a series of puns, going back and forth, having pun battles, if you will, having deep intellectual or deep emotional conversations can be a form of sex in and of itself, as opposed to just the physical, which is also one of the things that influences people's issues about saying that there was an emotional affair as opposed to a physical affair. And all of these things, both the intimacy and the sex, relate to our ability to bond. And the ancient Greeks had at least 4 different ways of looking at the relationships they can have around love and bonding. Yes, there is the romantic one. And it's the one that often is the subject of so many stories, so much material, and also so much heartache. But there's also the bond, and that is about family, both of our blood and of our intention, as well as our bond and with family and people in our communities. And now is the time to re-strengthen that. But for reasons that are about building the future for everyone, not just a small group. Then we deal with the aspect of shared money and property. And that's one of those moments where bonds can get broken as you're dealing with, say, someone who has passed, and now the cracks in the relationships and the bonds between siblings and family members start becoming even more apparent. If that person was a linchpin holding them together. Money can bring people together. It can also tear them apart. So it's being very aware of that. And again, a lot of the subjects of work that's going to be dealing with is going to be dealing with intimacy, sex, the bonding, the shared money, and the properties, which is also that aspect of dealing with the exterior world, because it's all these exterior relationships to money, to property. And property can also have an intimacy to it. It can have a bond to it that for some people is there. Such as, there are people there that really, really, really love money. Well, guess what? Money to them is something to be intimate with. Something that as much as they could have sex with. And that they have a bond with. So, this month of April is going to be much more about focusing on work and our bonds and our intimacy, but also what are we building? Building with those bonds and those intimacies. So, I hope this has been helpful. And on behalf of the ancestors, the Orishas, the Loas, the gods, and whatever you believe in, may you have a good April. Ashe.